In this animation, we will explain an important term which is activation energy. So what is activation energy? We know that when reactants collide with each other, they will react to produce the products. However, not all collisions will lead to a chemical reaction. And this is because there is a minimum amount of energy needed before colliding particles of reactants have sufficient energy to cause a reaction. So if the particles colliding didn't have the minimum amount of energy needed, they will not react. This energy needed to start a reaction is called the activation energy. So the activation energy is the minimum amount of energy needed for the colliding particles to react together. This reaction profile over here shows the activation energy for an exothermic reaction. Remember that in an exothermic reaction, the products have less energy than the reactants. To measure the activation energy, which is the energy needed to start the reaction, we will take 2 points. The first point is the energy level of the reactants, and the second one is the maximum energy. So pay attention. To measure the activation energy, you will not take the difference between the reactants and the products. Instead, you have to take the difference between the maximum point of energy and the energy level of the reactants. This is the reaction profile of an endothermic reaction where the products have more energy than the reactants. How to measure the activation energy? Excellent. We have to take 2 points. The first one is the energy level of the reactants, and the second one is the maximum point of energy. The difference between these 2 points is the activation energy. Again, don't take the difference between the energy of the reactants and the products. If colliding particles of reactants collide with less energy than the activation energy, they will just bounce off each other. So reactants must have this amount of energy, which is the activation energy, for their collision to be successful and lead to a chemical reaction and the production of the products. If the energy is less, they will bounce back and no product will be produced.